Good warm effect, that's a lot of fun.
So the next video that you'll be reacting to is a girl group called Cosmic Girls, or WJSN, and this song is called Secret. This was released in 2016 under Starship Entertainment and Yuha Entertainment. It looks like the visual effects were done by a person named Hu and Fantasy Lab, and the director is Zeyoung Kim. Animation done by Ellen Kim. Go ahead.
So all of this would have been generated images, of course. It would have been a combination of 3D elements and 2D elements combining into the finished shot. They might have done some space stuff and then like taken a still image of clouds. Again, just speculating, but it's sort of how we would do it if we were doing a video like this. This one was a sky replacement. They would have isolated the ground and then added in. Some of these clouds could have been in the original shot, but the planet and the sky and the shooting stars and the red and everything would have been enhanced from that and combined with elements of the sky that were already there. And they might also be doing some color to the flowers and stuff on the ground. Something like this, because it's a large scale area, they probably didn't do green screen on. It's more likely that they were just using the sky, timing it so that it would be a clear day, and then if there were parts where the sky was clouds and plains and all that behind it, they didn't have to do a little bit of rotoscoping to separate the foreground from the background. But it's a large area that probably wouldn't have used like a green screen or anything. They would have just used the sky. The sort of elf ears there would have been a practical makeup piece that they're putting on. This one, as she sort of moves, there's a little bit of a white halo around her face that indicates to me that this was a sky replacement and that there's a little bit of an edge there. If you know what to look for, is sort of an indicator of that. I'm guessing that the feathers would have been added in, although they could have had them on set and then sort of augmented them with the purples and the glows. But based on how they were sort of moving and how the colors stayed with them, I think that they were added in after the fact. This, they would have shot the talent in the car on like a green screen and then built the background digitally and integrated it in with the reflections and colors and everything. This would have been a graphics element that somebody made to incorporate into the heads-up display, and it's a bunch of different layers that sort of form shapes that look like monitors and displays and everything. The lighting is probably a combination of changing the lighting on set so that there's a flash of blue, and then when that happens, adding in a lightning bolt in the background. That water droplet floating through the air would have been a digital element that they're creating and simulating and shooting reflections for to integrate it into the scene. This would have been the talent on a green screen and then adding in the atmospherics in the background and everything. This is what they call a particle system. It has an emitter that is tracked into her eye and it spits out particles every frame essentially, and then they're adding a glow effect to it to kind of make it sparkle. Similar thing as before, where the car would have been on set and they would have been sitting on it, but the whole thing would be on a green screen, and then the Earth and space and the asteroids in the background would be computer generated. Purple lighting and everything would have been on set as well. That they would have had the camera moving around the car, whether it was on something like a dolly and a jib or possibly a Steadicam, and then you have to track the motion of it so that the space elements follow the same kind of thing, where there's a blue or green screen that key that out, and then anything that went beyond that you'd have to cut out through rotoscoping. This would have been an element that they created using, like, it kind of looks like space source images, and then they're distorting it and turning it into like an energy ball kind of thing. Good warmth effect, that's a lot of fun. That they would have had probably a blank page, and then as the pendulum swung over it, they would have animated the glowing design on there. The wings could be a generated element, and the glowy sort of trails coming off them probably are as well, although they could do something like shooting burning steel wool and having the little embers going through it and then sort of stretching that out in time so it creates long trails. It's a little bit hard to control doing something like that, and so my guess is it would have been CG sort of effect that they're doing to create the base for that. This I think would all be practical. I think that they have a light inside of the book where you can't see it, and then the foreground elements sort of dropping practically. That would have been somebody on a blue screen and then moving the camera and adding sort of the entering the atmosphere sort of effect. That is very similar to what is called a double exposure. When stuff was shot on film, you would basically take the film, expose it, and then before processing it, re-expose it to another image, and where the darkest parts were, you would get this sort of overlay effect, and so you get the stars where it's in shadow or the dark of their hair. This is recreating that, and so you would have 2 or 3 source images that you're then combining in the computer.
Yeah, so that one part where the car was by, was that you liked the effect or you thought it was cheesy?
I liked it.
Okay.
It was a fun effect. I liked this video quite a bit. It looked like it would have been a lot of fun to work on. Because so much of it was the sort of sky replacement, you'd spend a lot of time setting a look on 1 or 2 of the shots, and then you'd go through and match that to sort of every shot. It had a lot of cool elements in it that were a lot of fun.
Right. How do you think the visual effects artist did with creating this strange mystical world?
I think that they did a pretty good job. It did what it needed to for the video, which was convey this sort of otherworldly place, and they drove the sort of narrative of the, I guess, summoning very well with the visuals.
Cool. Okay, so this is the one that I was telling you about, how they could do a party and their heads fall off. So this is SHINee. So there are 5 members, and this was released in 2015, and the film is by STWT, and the director is Shin Hee-won.
Cool. So I'm guessing the glowing liquid is probably practical, and it might be augmented a little bit. I'm guessing they have like lights in the cup to make it sort of glow that way. Whereas this would be cutting out their hands and skin and adding the sort of blue color to it and glowing it like that. This probably would have been shoot a take for the head, shoot a take for the body, and then use the knife. It could even be a practical knife that sort of fits around the neck that they then use as the sort of transition point, and then we'd cut out his head and sort of slide it across. I'm wondering if they had a dummy head sort of thing that they dropped down and then tracked in the sort of yellow citrusy texture at the base of the neck, but they would have had to match its movement and sort of make sure it stayed consistent as it rolled through the frame. This, they would have shot his head separate on like a green screen and then cut off below the neck and then sort of animated it flying through the air. I'm guessing it was digital eyeballs that they animated flying out, starting from sort of where his head is, and then because it's so out of focus in the background, it'd be pretty easy to make it look real without having to go through all of the, like, you can kind of cut corners with it because a lot of it is hidden in the out of focusness. These probably would have been practical elements that they're rolling through the frame just because it would have been easier to do that than build the element specifically for these shots. For this, they're essentially generating a patch of his face where his eyes should be and shooting him normal and then covering up his eyes with the replacement. And probably this was done by freeze framing it, cloning different parts of his skin over his eyes and then tracking that in.
So would you have to color, like, pause, color it in, pause?
More likely you would only pause it once and then you would get a track of the face and track that sort of still frame in over it. Depending on how much the perspective changes and whatnot, you need to do more complicated versions of that. But for this movement, I think that they would have been able to pick a clean frame, cover up the eyes, and then track it in the shot. This, my guess, is they would have had the two actors be in the take and situated together, and then would have cut out below the neck and replaced it with a clean frame of the table and the guy behind the table, rather than like completely separate elements. I think that they would have shot essentially one take with him in front of it and then one take without, and filled in this area with the clean section. That was a camera underwater that they're filming from. Similar thing for what they did with the eyes. Grab a section, paint over the nose, sort of even it out so that the lighting felt right, and then track that in so it stayed on the face the entire time. This, they could have done a couple of different ways. It might be a fake sync that basically someone's just sticking their arm through and holding the nose piece. That probably ends up being the easiest, though they could have also shot the arm separate, cut off the bottom and integrated it into the sync plate. Both of those are equally likely. So this they would have shot normally with the two guys, and I'm guessing that they had them together in the same scene. Then they would have cut out the area of the orange jacket guy's head and replaced it with a clean frame of the background and done a similar face treatment for the guy with no eyes. A lot of what makes a shot like this easier is having it locked off so the camera isn't moving. It eliminates some variables in how things are moving in the background and whatnot, and makes the process quicker and less work for the visual effects artists. We liked locked off shots for this kind of thing. That probably would have been a separate element that they shot of a confetti cannon blowing stuff in the air. Generally those are shot on green screen or just straight black, depending on how you're integrating them. Both work and both have different advantages and disadvantages. It really depends on the shot. Some of those might not have needed to be a separate element. They could have had a special effects rig hidden behind them that is continually blowing out and would help with some of the integration of it going like around them, and that can be done through how the shot is framed and how it, like, sort of what you're hiding with the blocking. It's another way to do it. similar sort of effect, painting over the mouth and using that sort of patch to remove it. That's very common when we do digital beauty work. It's a similar process to that. We'll take wrinkles and pimples and whatnot and sort of remove that and then track it in. That was probably having something as a stand-in for the mouth that they place in the shot, and then they shoot a plate of somebody's singing and rotoscope it out and combine them together. That, I'm guessing, was a separate fire element. They might have shot a big burst of flame hitting sort of like a dummy, or it could have been a stock element that was created or purchased, and then the sort of after image of him being burned coming through could have been done as another plate as well. Either of those would have worked. I'm guessing that transition would have been one that was on set. They would have built the set to break apart like that, just because it is usually simpler to do that sort of thing on set than isolating him from the background and then the background breaking apart and then a separate shot for that you then have to integrate him into.
There you go. So yeah, out of the past 6 music videos, can you say which one was your favorite and why?
I really liked the one with the planet set extension and the sky replacement and the space sequence. I liked how the effects contributed to the story, and it would be a different music video without it, and I'm a sucker for space stuff.
Alright, and then do you see any difference between these type of visual effects versus what we put in American music videos?
They're actually very similar. I've worked on a number of videos that are very much, we're going to add this kind of effect throughout, like the glitches and whatnot, to kind of spice up the video. And I've also worked on a number of videos that was like creating an environment for the video to exist in and going, I guess, more surreal with the visuals. It all depends on sort of the genre of the music and the thing that the artist and the director are trying to do with the music video, and also how much time they have available for it and how much budget they have available for it.
Right. Can you tell which of these videos had the biggest budget by the amount of visual effects?
My guess would be the Cosmic Girls one, just because almost every shot of that was some sort of effect. This last one would have had a pretty big budget as well. And what budget really translates into is how many artist hours you can have on it. And so the number of shots contributes to that, the size of the team. So like if you have one person, it might take longer, but you're only paying one person. Whereas if you have 20 people working effects on it, then you can get it done in a shorter amount of time, but you're paying everybody a day rate kind of thing. Stuff like where they're replacing the entire background and generating an entire world, that is generally more complicated and more expensive than grabbing small parts of the image and glitching them out. That isn't to say one is better than the other, it's more of just logistics.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us
Thanks
in
for
this
having me.
series, and until next time.
여름의 뜨거운 태양보다 석양빛 너의 미소가 좋아 칵테일 쉐이킹 하듯이 너와 소파 위에 서서 뛰고파 샤메샤메야